For over a century, this city was the crown jewel of an empire. Really, this second city of a global power, a true hub of commerce, culture, and intellect. I mean, from here, fortunes were managed, rebellions were sparked, and the future of an entire subcontinent was written. Its name was once synonymous with just immense wealth and staggering influence. Yeah, this is what they called it. Just try to picture it. Grand European palaces rising up out of a swampy river delta, a monument to pure colonial ambition. This was the place where fortunes were made, new ideas took flight, and revolutions were plotted in quiet corners. And yet, fast forward just a few decades, and this was its new reputation, a city plagued by decay, deindustrialization, and despair, a symbol of lost glory. So, how on earth did this happen? The story of Kolkata is, well, it's a cautionary tale. It's about how a city's greatest strengths can actually become its biggest weaknesses. It's a story of politics, economics, and a series of devastating blows that brought an empire's jewel to its knees. To really understand the fall, you have to understand the rise. And you see, Kolkata's ascent was never organic. It was an artificial city, built from the top down for one single purpose: to serve the British East India Company. So for all its marble and grandeur, its foundation was, quite literally, built on sand. The city's very layout tells the whole story. On one side, you had the White Town, meticulously planned with these grand palaces for the British rulers. And on the other side, the Indian Town, a sprawling, chaotic mix of mansions and slums for pretty much everyone else. It was a city physically divided, a perfect mirror of that colonial hierarchy. Economically, this city wasn't so much a hub as it was a giant funnel. Its port was a gateway to the incredible riches of the subcontinent. The British built railways and roads with one goal in mind: extract raw materials like jute and tea, and then flood those same markets with finished British goods. And this system, it absolutely crushed local industries, turning the entire region into a dependent supplier. And here was the fatal flaw. Who actually owned this economic engine? Well, mostly it was foreign firms. Now contrast that with Mumbai, where local family-owned businesses were building local wealth and local expertise. Kolkata's prosperity was driven by outsiders for outsiders. So when those outsiders eventually packed up and left, the entire structure was just set up to collapse. By the early 20th century, the city wasn't just an economic hub. It had become the intellectual heart of the subcontinent and the absolute epicenter of the nationalist movement. And all of a sudden, its greatest cultural strength, that revolutionary spirit, was seen by the British as a dangerous threat. So the empire decided to strike back. The response was a series of calculated, devastating blows. First, in 1905, you have the Partition of Bengal, a classic divide-and-rule tactic. Then, the real hammer blow in 1911. The capital was moved to Delhi, politically sidelining the city on purpose. And finally, the Great Famine of 1943, where wartime policies led to an estimated 3 million deaths, completely shattering the region's stability. And here's the central irony in all of this. The very things that made the city so important, its ideas, its activism, its leadership, those were the exact reasons the British systematically took it apart. The punishment for being the heart of the revolution was a slow, deliberate strangulation. So if the colonial era planted the seeds of decline, the decades following independence in 1947 brought a catastrophic harvest. This wasn't a slow decay anymore. It was a perfect storm of disasters that all converged on the city at the exact same time. The partition of the subcontinent in 1947 was, for this city, an economic decapitation. The new border just cut the city off from its resources. Imagine this. The region had all the jute mills, but suddenly 80% of the raw jute fields were in another country. It's like owning 100 bakeries, but someone else now controls all the wheat. The city's most important industries were crippled, literally overnight. And while the city's economic base was being destroyed, it was hit by a tidal wave of people. Millions of refugees poured in from what was then East Pakistan. By 1951, they made up over a quarter of the city's entire population. The government was totally unprepared, and the city's already fragile infrastructure was pushed way past its breaking point. Then came a policy that, on paper sounded pretty fair, but in practice, it was devastating. It was called the Freight Equalization Policy. It subsidized the transport of minerals like coal. What this meant was that a factory thousands of kilometers away could get coal for the same price as a factory right next to the mine. It was like giving everyone in the country a free shipping coupon, and it completely erased the region's biggest geographical advantage. Industries had no reason to stay, and so they left. This just created a toxic spiral. Economic stagnation led to unemployment and riots. That fueled militant trade unions and constant strikes, which in turn scared away any and all investors. This flight of capital was massive. Businesses packed up their bags and just fled for more stable regions. The city of palaces had now officially become the dying city.
So while Kolkata was wrestling with the ghosts of its industrial past, the world and the rest of the country was moving on. A whole new economic revolution was beginning, the information technology wave. And this was a revolution the city was perfectly positioned to lead. But tragically, it missed the boat completely.
A new economic map was being drawn. Cities like Bengaluru and Hyderabad were transforming into global tech hubs. They were building tech parks, attracting massive investment, and becoming magnets for talent. You can see the list of winners, and you can see the name that really should have been on it, but just wasn't.
And here's the great irony. The city had always been the intellectual center. It had the universities, it had the engineering graduates, it had all of the human capital you could want for the IT revolution. But its political leadership, they were stuck in an old industrial mindset, and they feared that computers would lead to job losses, so they refused to invest. That hesitation was fatal, and it created a brain drain of its brightest minds that honestly continues to this day.
And this historical baggage just continued to haunt the state. Nothing illustrates this better than the Singur-Tata nano incident back in 2008. A massive car factory was all set to be built, but a huge political dispute over land forced the company to pull out and move the entire project to another state. It was a high-profile disaster that cemented the region's anti-industry image in the minds of investors everywhere. So where does that leave the city today? Well, after decades of stagnation, there is a new effort to finally turn the page. But the challenge is absolutely monumental, trying to reverse nearly a century of negative momentum. Today, we're seeing a real push to capture the opportunities that were missed all those years ago. New projects like a Silicon Valley tech hub are trying to attract the kind of investment that went to other cities decades ago, and is showing some early signs of success, with major tech firms expanding their presence. The goal is clear: create high-value jobs and finally reverse that brain drain. And this brings us to the final question. Can a city truly reverse a century of history to reclaim its place? Or is it destined to remain a beautiful, tragic museum of a grander, bygone era? The answer? Well, it's still being written.